Talk to us about what you think your main job is as Chief Innovation Officer at Avis.
Oh, I can tell you I'm glad I don't have to deal with the market on a quarterly basis like our CEO and CFO. But at a high level, because it's kind of a wonky title.
Yeah.
Right. And I've had it for about 2.5 years, and it's the first time they've had a Chief Innovation Officer at ABG. At the highest level, one way to define it is how do you 10x the value of the company in 1/10 of the time? It's kind of weird. When you unwrap that, it's really what are new technologies, new products, new partners, and new solutions that actually can address not only the current customers' issues and problems with mobility, but can expand the total addressable market. Because essentially, I mean, we have some of the best brands in the world, including Zipcar. So if we could provide a mobility solution for everybody who actually recognizes the brand, that'd be really cool.
Yeah. So. How do you think the model of a rental car company has changed in the past decade?
That's a great question. Can I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
To the audience? How many of you today took a Lyft or an Uber to get here? Did you raise your hand? How many of you took a Via? Anyone take Via? I love you.
There we go, over there.
Oh, there too. I love you too. And how many of you in the last month have rented a car? Not necessarily from Avis or Budget, but rented a car. Okay. Keep your hands up, those who rented. And if you rented that car, did you rent it for more than just one day? How many of you who rented a car rented it for just one day? That's how we've changed.
Yeah.
All right. So the traditional rental car company and our industry, because we kind of fall out that way, half the customers are corporate/business, right? Half the customers are leisure. The corporate business side tends to rent multiple times a year. Leisure, one or twice a year, if that. The leisure side's been great, and that's going to continue moving forward. The business side is where it's gotten very interesting, right? But then overall, where it's also changed is not necessarily from the negative side, but if you look at all the cool stuff that it supposedly is happening in terms of mobility, transport, on-demand, urban and suburban, I think we actually have really cool, really good assets that can help enable that, but from a partnership perspective.
Yeah. It's funny that you say supposedly. Why do you use that word?
Well, how many invested into Uber and Lyft prior to their IPO? Sorry, you don't have to raise your hands. I think supposedly because, again, let's do a little unwrapping. I think there are definitely elements that are changing the technology side of transport.
Yeah.
And in that, there are some that are immediate and now. Connectivity is one, and I know we want to talk about that. There are those that are inevitable, but we're still not sure how they get rolled out, where, when, and to what models, like autonomous vehicles, self-driving, that we're working with Waymo on. So that's one. And then the other category is, are they actual customers? Is mobility, right? And what people really need, where they live, what they do. Is the second car going to go away, right? Are we moving towards fragmentation in terms of ownership? So one last question, sorry, indulge me on this. How many of you have a car share membership? How many of you have used or have used Zipcar? Thank you for that. That's one of our companies. And so that we see moving much more, right?
When you talk about connectivity, what does a connected car look like? What does that mean? Good question. So connected car for us, let me first state that there's a technical definition in terms of telematics, right? And that's really boring. We won't get into it unless you're an auto geek, and then we can talk later, or I'll have you talk to someone who actually really likes that. But the business definition of what a connected car is open. Yeah. So we have one. And when we say that a car is connected in our fleet, it has to do 6 things. First, we have to be able, and in real time, we have to know its location in real time. We have to know its mileage in real time. We have to know the fuel to the 10th of a gallon or the 10th of a liter in real time, or the percentage of charge, if it's an EV. we need to be able to communicate with the systems of the car when it gives out, for example, diagnostic trouble codes. But we also, in this fourth one, want to preemptively communicate with the car. So for example, I want the car to tell me when its front left tire is 5 psi away from triggering that lovely warning light on the dashboard that gives your rental experience such panache, doesn't it? Don't you love it when those lights come on? It's like, great. Because when that car tells me that I have 5 psi left, then in the morning, that service agent of ours at Newark knows which tire on that car, and can, A, create a better experience for you, B, create more efficiencies in terms of the workforce that they have, and then C, we end up buying less tires, which is important when you multiply 4 times a million cars, right? So that's 4. 5, remote access. In other words, via your smartphone, you can remotely locate, lock, and unlock your car. That's what you do with Zip cars today, and that's what we're doing with the entire fleet. And finally, the 6th one is authentication and immobilization, again, like with Zipcar, which is only the appropriate and authorized customer can not only access the car, but actually turn the engine over and get it moving. So that's our definition of what a connected car is across the fleet.
So you talked about a lot of the positives of that. I think there's obviously a ton of concern that people have when it comes to privacy and interconnectivity.
Let's get into that.
I'm not sure if people saw recently, Chicago had a slight car-to-go incident where someone was...
I'm so sad about that. I really, really am.
Someone was allegedly able to hack into several cars and drive them away because they are all interconnected. And if you are able to hack one open, you're able to hack several of them open. In a bigger and non-real example, Fast and the Furious, where a hacker was able to drive many cars out of buildings. But I mean, obviously that's fantastical, but I think when we talk about cars being interconnected and being able to talk to them, move them, unlock them remotely, there is some level of fear and concern about what that means. How are you guys thinking about that?
First, you're absolutely right. A connected car, connected vehicle, even if they're not completely connected, your vehicles are essentially now nodes on an Internet of Things network, right? And think about how many IP addresses you already have in your home or your apartment, and how many IP addresses your vehicle has or will have. So the amount of security and the fact that that is the new normal, and the kind of investment that you have to make into that security if you're in telecommunications or broadband, which I was before I came over to automotive, is absolutely the level that you have to have if you manage a connected fleet, period, right? And you have to also take the mind frame that this is not something that you solve, right? This is something that you prepare for and you continuously invest in, and you assume that you're going to have to continue to invest and keep at the forefront of security, right? Because what could happen is terrible. Right? And so the good news is, to your point, the worst case scenarios today have been theft and fraud. Those are still bad, especially from an EBITDA perspective. What you don't want to get into, obviously, is theft of personally identifiable information of drivers, and passengers. You don't want PII gone, and you don't want outright real-time manipulation of the vehicle. Right? Because that would suck.
Yep.
So
I want you to talk more about the partnership with Waymo. Obviously, the idea of autonomous vehicles and rentals seem like they go pretty well together, but how are you guys thinking about that specifically?
Oh, would love to. By the way, I love Waymo. It's a great company. I was telling Gillian that was the first deal I cut when I started 2.5 years ago with John Krafchick and his team. I just want to make sure, are there any Waymo or Google attorneys in this room? Any Waymo PR people in this room, because they're even scarier.
I think you're okay.
Okay, good. In all seriousness, one of the reasons that we wanted to form a relationship with Waymo, and that was the first target objective that I had when I started working for Larry Deshawn, our CEO, was because not only are they without question, the technology leader with the most miles logged and the least amount of interrupts of any of the AV technology providers out there today. And by interrupts, I mean when someone actually has to take over the wheel, right, or take over the controls during a self-drive. Their mission is the right mission, right? Their mission and why they started was all about envision a world where there are no fatalities from traffic accidents. Envision a world that's safe, right? So it wasn't all the other ancillary benefits, that you can translate into business metrics and into commerce. Those are great too. But the fact that the initial mission was that, on a personal level, I was like, got to work with these guys, right? So the last 2.5 years have been with Waymo have been fascinating, because what we do with them, to the extent that I can talk about it, is we provide the fleet management for the Waymo fleet. So they're headquartered in Mountain View, obviously, but the bulk of what they have publicly talked about previously was in Austin, but now is in Phoenix. So in Phoenix, what we've done is we've actually taken a bunch of our facilities and we've modified them so that Waymo self-driving vehicles and the engineers and drivers who are their staff utilize our facilities. We provide maintenance and cleaning as well. We actually manage the fleet, and we also title and register their new primarily Pacificas, right? Once they're outfitted and ready to get street ready. The flip side of that, though, why we're doing that is not because we want to get paid for cleaning your windshield, like here in New York City. I think what we want to do is we want to learn. We want to understand, what does it mean when you actually have a self-driving vehicle? How does it change our operations? How does it change the physical facility, right? Because there are issues around left-hand turn and right-hand turn, right? And then, how do our customers feel about actually getting inside an AV vehicle, right? So we're teeing up, and we talked about this publicly, we're teeing up commercial pilots, with Waymo and Waymo One, to start understanding, yes, I really like this makes me nervous. How do we get to an appropriate value proposition? Because at some point, Gillian, it's not an if, it's a when. We will have AV in our fleet. You will be in an AV vehicle at some point, if you haven't already. So it's an inevitability. So our job is, and my job is, to get ahead of the curve.
How close to that when do you think you are?
Oh, this is when the gag comes down. Well, we're doing the commercial pilots now.
Yeah.
If you're talking about scale, I can give you a personal opinion.
Yeah.
I think that we will see scale faster than we think, but in targeted areas and for very, very specific use cases. So it won't be the way that when someone buys a truck or a car today, you can take it anywhere and you can use it for a variety of private, personal, commercial, and business opportunities, right? I think that there are a lot of bright folks, not just Waymo, working in partnership with urban and suburban authorities, determining which particular use cases make the most sense for that particular area or that city. That's what I think will surprise us over the next couple of years, that we'll see that. So
I want to let our audience know I have another question or two, but if you have questions, you can open up your app and start putting them in, and we will take them in a little bit. So what are the big things that you've learned? You said this is largely a learning exercise. What are the big takeaways for you?
On the AV side or the connected side, or both?
On the AV side.
On the AV side. The cars don't actually talk to you. I was really disappointed. I was standing in front of the first Waymo vehicle, and I was like, hey, what's your name?
David Hasselhoff.
Yeah, I'm Arthur. They're surprisingly comfortable.
Yeah.
Because I was expecting that when, my first ride in, when we first started it, that it would be, there would be like essentially a gigantic computer in the back. But in all seriousness too, what we are learning from this is that it is frightening in a good way how fast, going back to the theme of this conference, how fast that fleet learns. And what was also fascinating was because we were able to kind of, as a partner, see a little bit behind the curtain, definitely not totally. I think Waymo is very, very secretive, and there's a good reason for it. But to understand just the commitment to their learning, right? And I think there's a reason why only, again, personal opinion, only very few of the AV initiatives that are out there today will succeed. Because the amount of data that has to be learned, the amount of firepower that you have to apply from an ML, from a machine learning perspective, and multiply that against every road. Just think about that, right? So, and I know that there are competitive modalities right now in terms of what's the best way to actually achieve the most effective level 5 driving solution, which is level 5 is pure, go for it. Drop that car anywhere, right? And in any situation. I think that again, the kind of investment, and therefore the kind of capabilities you have to get there, and the kind of mapping, it makes you then understand that it isn't a tidal wave that will sweep instantly across continents. It's going to be a mosaic. And it will light up where it makes the most sense first. And and in order to do that, you have to have not only mapping data of where things are from a static perspective, you're going to have dynamic data in real time.
Yeah. Let's go to some questions. Luke asked, if a connected car could be hacked, why even take the risk? What benefits make that risk worth it?
Good question, Luke. So number one, right now, none of our connected cars in our fleets have been hacked. Part of it has been the architecture and the investment into the solution. Gillian's story, which we obviously followed and tracked very closely, of a competitor and what happened there, sadly is not surprising given what we know on the tech side, but I mean, that's one of the reasons why Avis Budget Group bought Zipcar, which is the pioneer and the leader on telematics from the connected fleet perspective, about 4 or 5 years ago, and why we've continuously invested over time into that. That's my little pitch, right? In terms of why and what are the benefits of connected, I think that they're tremendous. It would completely transform, I think, the economics of our current business. And it also would potentially create as magical a journey as possible for those passengers who are actually leveraging or utilizing that connected car, whether it's for a 6-hour Zipcar reservation or whether it's for the average 4-day Avis rental. I can get more into specifics. I'm happy to chat with whoever afterwards with regards to that. But yeah, there are economic benefits as well as customer and user experience benefits.
All right, so we have another question from Yale saying, whether I choose Lyft, Uber, Via, or and this is my favorite, M60 to LaGuardia, is often a calculation of time and cost. What will be the impact of AV on the actual cost of transport?
Good question. I think, obviously, the immediate impact of AV from an economic perspective is you're not paying a driver, right? And those economics are very different. Ask Dara and his folks, or John and Logan, what that means to them in their current businesses. But I also think, I'm glad that someone raised up that question. So obviously AV, most immediate impact, cost of driver, which translates directly into profitability and total cost of ownership, right, in that equation. But I think the other flip side is you also make the assumption that AV vehicle may hopefully be two things. It'll either be hybrid or pure EV, right, which also adds efficiencies. And depending on the fleet ownership or the ownership of that particular vehicle, it will be multi-purpose and multi-tenant. And what we mean by that is on that particular day, you may be taking that EV vehicle to get to LaGuardia, but the next day, that vehicle may be rented out by a Lyft or Uber driver to use it for that day on that purpose. And then the third day, it'll actually be rented by a professional transport company who's doing deliveries for Amazon Flex or for DoorDash. So the real key behind this and the real key behind the economic or objective behind our strategy, behind a universal fleet, going back to the benefits, right, is imagine a universal fleet that's completely connected with the highest degree of utilization, because instead of just a single-purpose fleet that's for rental, or a single-purpose fleet that's for car share, or a single-purpose fleet that's for car hail, you have a universal connected fleet where you're driving efficiencies into the operations in the business, you're leveraging AI to do this continuously from an improvement perspective, and you're upping the utilization of this freaking thing up, north of 80%, because you are constantly, because you're supporting multiple use cases and models. Yeah. Right? That's why we are working with Uber, and we are working with Lyft, and we're working with Via and a couple of others along the lines of that universal fleet.
Let's close on this question. What's the case for the rental car compared to rideshare, in your opinion?
You mean I wasn't clear enough on that one? I think the case for the rental car, okay, so I'll take that in two ways. What's the case for the rental car? Exactly what I said. A connected fleet, in a connected universal fleet, rental is one of multiple use cases that carries its own set of economics for that particular customer. And that universal fleet can also, and that car then is a rental car, it is a delivery car, it is a subscription car, it is a fill in the blank, right? That's what that connected vehicle is. And so instead of looking at alternate and competitive business models, and that's the reason why we're partnering, and that's what makes us different versus other competitors, is that in a universal fleet that is data-driven, that has AI driving continuous improvement in efficiencies and increasing the margin, you have changed the face of what fleet management and urban and suburban mobility looks like. So that's pretty cool.
Everyone, please join me in thanking Arthur.